January 15, 2026. A federal judge used shocking words in his dissenting opinion. Racial gerrymandering, dirty work, racial system of self-interest, and the target. California Democrats. How innocent is the map change known as Proposition 50 approved by voters? How were Latino voters targeted to gain 5 new Democratic congressional seats? And most importantly, how could this case change California politics if it goes to the Supreme Court? Hello, I'm E.Parker. I'm here from California, continuing to illuminate the dark corridors of politics. The news I'm sharing with you today is a bombshell that could shake up the political map of the Golden State. A federal judge says Democrats manipulated election districts, and this isn't just an allegation. It's supported by court documents. Because this story sheds light on one of the most controversial issues in American democracy. First, let's understand this. What is gerrymandering? The word comes from Elbridge Gerry, the governor of Massachusetts in 1812. Gerry drew the electoral districts in such bizarre ways to give his party an advantage that the map resembled a salamander. Gerry plus salamander equals gerrymander. Since then, this tactic has been one of the most controversial practices in American politics. You draw the electoral districts in such a way that the opposing party's votes are divided or concentrated in a single district. The result? Your party wins more seats with fewer votes. Gerrymandering is done with 2 main tactics: packing and cracking. Packing is to concentrate the opposing party's voters in a single district. For example, if you concentrate all Republicans in one district, you will lose that district but win all the others. Cracking, on the other hand, is to distribute the opposing party's voters across many districts. This way, they cannot form a majority in any district. These tactics have been used for centuries. But in the 2020s, thanks to technology and data analysis, gerrymandering became a science. Now, artificial intelligence and computer algorithms can draw the most effective maps. So, is gerrymandering illegal? No, not always. If it's done purely for partisan gain, it's generally considered legal. But if it's done on the basis of race or ethnicity, then it violates the Voting Rights Act. And that's exactly what happened in California, allegedly. Democrats engaged in gerrymandering by targeting Latino voters and concentrating them in certain areas. This isn't just partisan gain, it's racial gerrymandering. And that's a serious accusation. In America, election maps are normally redrawn every 10 years after the census. After the 2020 census, states redrew new maps in 2021 to 2022, but some states are redrawing the map without waiting 10 years. This is called mid-decade redistricting, and this is very rare. It is usually only done if there are significant population changes or court decisions. But sometimes, it can be done for political advantage. And that's exactly what happened in California and Texas. November 2025, California, voters see an interesting question on the ballot. Proposition 50, should California redraw its congressional districts? That's the question. But it's not an ordinary question. There's a big political strategy behind it. Governor GavinNewsom and Democratic leaders support this proposition. Why? Because the goal is to turn a region with 5 Republican strongholds into Democratic territory. That means 5 new Democratic congressional seats. This is a move that could shift the balance of power in the House of Representatives. And voters approved this proposition with a 52% vote. But the real story of Proposition 50 is much more complex. The reason for this move is what happened in Texas in early 2025. Texas Governor Greg Abbott and the Republican-controlled Texas legislature redistricted their state. The goal? To gain more Republican congressional seats. Texas changed its map, aiming for 3-2 for new Republican seats. Democrats called it election theft, and California Democrats said, if Texas can do it, so can we. This was a counter-move. Newsom stated clearly during the Proposition 50 campaign, "We are responding to Trump's cheating in Texas, so this isn't just California's internal affairs. It's part of a nationwide political battle. Republicans are gaining an advantage in Texas, while Democrats are retaliating in California. Two major states, two major parties, and control of Congress in the middle." How aware were voters of this bigger picture when they endorsed Proposition 50? Most just saw the message, "Let's stop the Republicans," but the details were much darker. After Proposition 50 was approved, the map-making job was given to PaulMitchell. Mitchell is one of California's leading political data experts. He has worked on many election campaigns before and is experienced in map-making. But Mitchell's work this time would be very controversial, because Mitchell faced the accusation that he drew the map not only according to party interests, but also according to race and ethnicity. And that's where things started to get complicated. According to the map Mitchell drew, 5 districts in particular were completely reshaped. These districts were previously won by Republicans. But in the new map, more Latino voters were added to these districts. The result? Districts that are demographically closer to Democrats. Mathematically, a perfect plan. Legally, very problematic. Because if this map was drawn on a racial basis, it means there is a violation of the Voting Rights Act, and that's exactly what the Republicans claimed and went to court, where if 2026 a 3-member federal panel of judges delivers its verdict, 2-1, they approve Proposition 50's map. The Democrats win, the map is valid. But the real bombshell was in the dissenting opinion. Judge Kenneth Lee was the sole dissenting judge, and his dissenting opinion is a fireball. Lee said, California has engaged in dirty dealings by practicing racial gerrymandering. He was very harsh from the start. And that was just the beginning. He had much more to write. The most striking part of Lee's dissenting opinion is this. The cigarette gun is in PaulMitchell's hand. Lee says Mitchell clearly took race into account when drawing the map. And the proof, words Mitchell told his political allies. Mitchell said he was working to secure Latino territories while drawing the map. That's a direct admission of racial gerrymandering. Lee asks, with such clear evidence, how can we ignore it? And it's a very good question indeed. Lee also criticizes Mitchell's refusal to appear in court. The judicial panel called Mitchell as a witness. But Mitchell didn't come. His lawyers said, "My client will not testify. That's very suspicious. If what you're doing is legal, why don't you come to court and defend yourself?" Lee says that's an admission of guilt, and he added, Mitchell's silence speaks volumes. Indeed it does. Mitchell's decision not to appear in court overshadowed the entire case. Another harsh criticism from Lee is this: Democrats are pandering to Latino voters. Pandering, meaning trying to curry favor. According to Lee, Democrats don't really care about the interests of Latino voters. They just want to use their votes to win more seats in Congress. This is a very serious accusation. Because if it's true, it means Democrats are manipulating the Latino community. And that's very problematic both ethically and legally. Lee uses the term racial interest system, that is, using race for political gain. Lee also criticizes the majority opinion. The majority to judges say, yes, California redistricted, but it was a counter-move to what Texas did. The motive was partisan interest, not race, but Lee disagrees. Lee writes, partisan interest doesn't change the fact of racial gerrymandering. The two can coexist, and he's right. It's possible that the Democrats acted for both partisan and racial reasons. And if the race factor was involved, it's illegal. PaulMitchell, a figure who works in the shadows of California politics. Most people don't know him, but he's one of the most important figures shaping California's political map. Mitchell runs a company called Political Data Intelligence. This company provides election data, demographic analysis, and map-making services. Democratic campaigns, unions, and organizations use Mitchell's services. In short, he's the map master of the California Democrats. And the Proposition 50 map is his work. When you look at Mitchell's background, you see that he's a very experienced person. He's been active in California politics for over 20 years. He also played a role in the 2011 and 2021 redistricting processes. He's very good at map-making. He thinks mathematically and strategically. But this chimi points afar. The words Mitchell said to his political allies put him in a difficult position. His statement about securing Latino areas was interpreted as an admission of racial gerrymandering. And Mitchell couldn't defend those words in court because he never showed up. So, why didn't Mitchell come to court? His lawyers said, "Our client is invoking his Fifth Amendment right. That is, the right not to incriminate himself. This is usually used in criminal cases. But this was a civil case. It's very interesting that Mitchell invoked this right. If there's nothing legally wrong with what he did, why isn't he defending himself? Republicans say this is a confession of guilt, and indeed, Mitchell's silence is very suspicious. Perhaps if he had gone to court, he would have had to lie. And instead of lying, he chose to remain silent. GavinNewsom declared victory after the judge's decision. The Republicans' weak attempt to silence voters failed. California voters overwhelmingly supported Proposition 50, and the court confirmed that, Newsom said. He emphasized that this was a move against Texas. "We responded to Trump's cheating in Texas," he said. According to Newsom, this was simply a fair response. If Texas redistricts, California will too. Simple. But is it really that simple? The Democrats' main argument is, we did it for the party, not for race. So the goal wasn't to manipulate Latino voters, but to defeat the Republicans. Latino majority districts were created because Latinos generally vote for Democrats. So, it's just a logical political strategy. It's party gerrymandering, not racial gerrymandering. And party gerrymandering, according to the Supreme Court, is generally legal. The Democrats are using this argument to defend themselves. But Republicans don't accept that argument. According to them, saying we did it for the party isn't enough. If race was used in the process, then it's illegal. And PaulMitchell's words show that race was a factor. Republicans say, Mitchell explicitly said he created Latino zones. That's racial gerrymandering. And they couldn't deny it in court because Mitchell didn't show up, and that's a very strong argument. Because Mitchell's silence really does raise suspicion. Democrats also say, the Voting Rights Act forced us to create Latino majority districts, so it was a legal requirement. The Voting Rights Act seeks to guarantee representation for minority voters. And sometimes, it's necessary to create minority-majority districts. Democrats say, we were just enforcing the law, but Republicans respond, no, you did much more than that. You created Latino districts, but the goal wasn't to protect Latino rights, it was to win a Democratic seat. Now, the ball is in the Supreme Court's court. The California Republican Party will apply to the Supreme Court for an urgent injunction. The goal is to stop the implementation of the Proposition 50 map. If they succeed, the 2026 election will be held under the old map. But if they fail, the new map will be used, and the Democrats will likely gain 5 new seats. What the Supreme Court decides on this matter is important, not just for California, but for all of America. Because this decision could redefine gerrymandering rules. The Supreme Court has a mixed history on redistricting. In 2019, the court said that partisan gerrymandering is not a matter for federal courts. So, Engaging in gerrymandering for partisan gain is unquestionable at the federal level. But racial gerrymandering is different. That's absolutely illegal. So, the key point in the California case is, was this map drawn on a racial basis or just on a partisan basis? If the Republicans can prove the racial factor, they can win. But proving it is very difficult. Justice Lee's dissenting opinion is very valuable to the Republicans. Because Lee, as a federal justice, explicitly wrote that there was racial gerrymandering. This can be used as strong evidence in the Supreme Court. Republicans can say, see, even a federal justice agrees with us, but on the other hand, the majority opinion supports the Democrats. The map was approved by a 2-to-1 decision. Will the Supreme Court listen to the majority or the minority? That's a very important question. And we may learn the answer months from now. California is once again at the center of American politics. Proposition 50 is not just a map change. It raises fundamental questions about how democracy works. Who should draw the electoral districts? How decisive can party interests be? And what role should race play in this process? These are not easy questions. And the Supreme Court's decision may shape American politics for decades to come. I'm E.Parker, and I'll continue to bring you the facts from California. Subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications. This case has just begun. Share your thoughts in the comments. Is gerrymandering fair or a betrayal of democracy? See you in the next video. Teiki kari!